All right, I'm going to start with this question because we get it all the time. It's in our name. What is RevOps? All right, our company's called RevOps HQ, so we get asked this a lot. What is RevOps? Well, RevOps is revenue operations, which explains nothing, basically. But when we explain what RevOps is to our clients, they go, "That's what we want." Right. So what I'm going to do today is basically give you a brief reference video, a brief reference guide for what RevOps is, what RevOps is not, what historically RevOps has emerged to solve, and also where I think RevOps is going. And I'm also going to give you a couple key terms and a few artifacts that we're often dealing with in RevOps, because I feel a big barrier to entry to understanding RevOps is understanding a lot of the terminology that's being thrown around everywhere. That was, at least for me, a big obstacle to learning about what RevOps was. I was at a HubSpot agency, and people were calling themselves RevOps consultants and RevOps agencies, and I was like, you do what I do, so what is that? I don't even understand why you're using that term, right? But the more I looked into it, the more I realized, oh, this is an emerging formalized discipline and area of concentration and way of kind of codifying certain best practices for how we manage certain aspects of our business in certain ways. So, RevOps 101. Let's start with this. This is RevOps 101, okay? Historically, no single department was held accountable for the financial performance of the entire company, right? Marketing, measured on leads, or lead quality, I guess you could say. Sales, they're measured on closed deals. Customer success, on retention. But no one owned the system. No one was held responsible for the whole thing. That's why you're seeing a lot of these things pop up, probably, right? You're seeing like a chief revenue officer is a title popping up, head of RevOps, head of revenue that's popping up. And you see people in those roles where you're like, that's a sales guy, that's a marketing guy, that's a CX guy, right? Like how are all these different people ending up in revenue roles, right? So this is why people are investing in revenue departments, in revenue positions, in RevOps as an infrastructural and operational support of this revenue concept, because somebody needs to be held responsible, right? There's this concept in business, which is a little violent, but this concept of one throat to choke or one brain to trust in a RevOps contest, basically one team to be held responsible when revenue breaks down, and that are motivated by being measured by the performance of the company on a revenue basis. Right, so that's why companies are investing in RevOps, right? I want to explain one key term really quick before we move forward, and it's this concept of GTM. I see people use this term all the time, GTM, which stands for go to market, right? This is how I want to explain GTM to you, because it took me a long time to understand it, and I don't know why it took me a long time to understand it, but it did. It finally clicked when I put it this way for myself. Okay, I see basically 5 universal departments in every company. And that doesn't mean every company has formally all these departments, but every company has some version of an individual or team performing these functions. On the one end, you've got product, right? Product development, product building, product design. And all the way on the other end of the company, you've got finance, which is financial reporting. And in between these two departments, between product and finance, you've got a product that goes to market, right? Like what do you do with the product? You bring it to market. What does a product do? It goes to market. So between product and finance, you've got these 3 departments: marketing, which hands off to sales, which hands off to customer success, right? And all of these metrics accumulate and pile up and get handed over to finance. So that's how I see the flow of a company from a RevOps perspective, is you're going from the product team, right? To product hands off to marketing, marketing hands off to sales, hands leads off to sales hands customers off to customer success, and then customer success obviously tries to retain and upsell those. And there's a lot of dynamics, and you can go very deep into all those topics. But RevOps I see as owning those middle 3, right? That once product hands off to marketing, it becomes the domain of RevOps. And then RevOps is responsible for designing and orchestrating the system that facilitates the movement of that product from lead generation to closed deals to customer success, and then hands off those metrics and is responsible for articulating the success of all those hands-offs in terms of metrics that can be digested and intelligibly reported by sales or by finance to a board, to investors, to a C-suite, right? So RevOps is really responsible for that marketing, sales, customer service handoff. So go-to-market is such a buzzword in RevOps because it's the moment that RevOps becomes responsible for what's happening in the company, right? When product hands off to marketing, that's when something goes to market. That's when RevOps kicks in and says, let's go. And we need a strategy for doing this. So RevOps, when they talk about people talk about this all the time. I'm going to help your company develop a go-to-market strategy, right? It's like, what does that mean? I'm going to help you prepare to make that handoff from the product department or the individual or team that's doing that to the marketing department, right? So it's not just buzz. This is becoming a legitimate discipline within business because it's a legitimate need. We need that one throat to choke. We need that one department that's responsible for the financial performance of the company, right? That's why companies are investing in RevOps, right? 28%, check this statistic out. There's a lot of statistics right now around revenue operations. Business journals are doing a lot of reporting, okay? There's a 2022 Forrester report. 28% of sales teams say they have a high degree of alignment with marketing. Okay, that's basically a quarter, 1 out of 4, which means 3 out of 4 sales teams believe they are misaligned, right? That's where revenue comes in and says, I'm going to align that handoff, right? Here's another stat. This is from SiriusDecisions. Companies with strong alignment across GTM teams, marketing, sales, customer success, grow 19% faster and are 15% more profitable. Why? It makes sense because you have somebody paying attention to these things, to these exact metrics, and are measured in their performance by whether these metrics are high or low. One more stat. This is from a BCG study, 2023. High-performing RevOps organizations see 10 to 20% increase in sales productivity within their first year. And we're getting a lot of this data right now, a lot of this first-year RevOps team data, because a lot of revenue teams are being born and are in their first, second, third year in companies right now because it is a younger discipline, right? And not only is it younger, it's becoming necessary, right? RevOps is no longer optional. It is the control panel for modern growth. It's how investors think. It's how VCs think. It's how startups need to think, right? As companies mature, as individuals who are entrepreneurs or companies that have ambitions strive to be taken seriously in the marketplace, they are forced now, especially now, to conform to the best practices of what we are now starting to call revenue operations. So what is RevOps? Why are we using it? Because there is a consolidation and a codification of a formal discipline that pays attention to the things that matter most that contribute to the growth of a company and the success of a company. Whereas previously, no single department was responsible for that. RevOps is not just a CRM admin. It's not just a reporting role where you're building dashboards, right? It's not just this catch-all job for things that other departments kind of ignore. It's not those things, okay? RevOps is architectural, but it's not just architectural. It's also pragmatic. It is, let's go back to my definition of RevOps, right? It is the design and orchestration of the systems responsible for the revenue growth of a company. So it's about designing that system, enforcing those rules, and measuring performance across functions, not in silos, right? Are we functioning as a whole? Are we performing, right? Are we producing outcomes that matter at the end? If you see RevOps as tactical, you'll keep that firefighting, right? If you treat it as strategic, you'll build an engine that scales, right? If RevOps is just putting out fires all the time and taking all the tasks from all the, if it becomes basically an administrative rather than an executive function, then it will not succeed, very likely. So Now let's move into some terms you should know. To practice RevOps well, you need to kind of think in systems. And these are the kind of fundamental terms of the RevOps systems. Okay, first, you have this concept of system design. Very often, the artifact of a system design will be like a BPMN diagram, or it's a BPMN is just business process modeling notation. It's like a specific special way of building like flowcharts, basically. So, or something like that. But you'll have a business process that is designed as a system. And the intentional architecture behind your revenue process is this system design. So this is done up front, but most of the time with companies, it's done after the fact, because many companies that have existed for 30, 40, 50 years are just getting into RevOps and they need their systems mapped in their current state, right? Now, here's another concept, current state and future state. Right? Now, this is an aspect of change management where you have the current state of your process, which is we're going to map your system in a specific notation so that we can understand what's happening right now. And then from a RevOps perspective, I'm going to add strategy and fuse your company with strategy by creating a future state. And then we generate a task list to convert your company from the present state to the future state. And then we test what's working and what's not. Here's another term that you'll hear in RevOps all the time, alignment. Okay? This means unified goals, unified metrics, unified incentives across marketing, sales, and customer success, right? Those middle three departments. Here's another concept you'll hear about in RevOps, process governance, right? Okay. I have a marketing background, but I think that sales is the most important team in a company. That's basically not true, but I feel like it's true because I see what these people do every day, and it's amazing. But one of the things that salespeople will totally admit is that they resist normalization, right? Salespeople resist normalization. They do not like you to tell them how to work. They do not like the admin part of sales, right? And listen, fair enough. Right? Fair enough. If you could just have salespeople closing deals all day, every day, that would be ideal for the company too. But there's a harmony that RevOps requires salespeople to have between focusing on closing deals and winning deals and doing the administrative work that makes their successes visible, demonstrable, repeatable, and scalable for the rest of the company. Right? We need to understand how what you're doing can be measured and repeated. Otherwise, everybody is just running around doing their own thing, and what is not done consistently cannot be improved, right? So salespeople need to follow the process that RevOps, it's really a RevOps function to lay out this compliance and to enforce that compliance. So we design what rules salespeople need to follow. That's part of the system design, but then we also implement the features in place in the technology stack we're using to make sure that the salespeople have no other choice but to comply with that process, right? Here's another key concept that goes into RevOps, this concept of a source of truth, right? A source of truth is a trusted system, usually a CRM, usually something like HubSpot or Salesforce, where all GTM data is clean, accessible, and consistent, right? It's not like a spreadsheet. It's all the data is as normalized as possible, accessible to the right people who need it at the right time, and is consistent, right? You don't have multiple pieces of data in multiple different places that are coming from different places that are all meant to represent the same thing, right? This is where HubSpot and its own branding really got it right, where they said as a CRM, HubSpot is meant to be the single source of truth, right? Where everything comes back to one field and one object, right? So every business is going to be a balance of the benefits of simplicity and the needs, the necessity for complexity, and you're never going to avoid that. But in HubSpot, in a CRM, you want to treat that as a source of truth. That's a key concept in RevOps, source of truth. What is the source of truth? This system says this, that system says that. What is your source of truth? And you should have as close to one sources of truth as possible. Another term you'll hear is lead to revenue architecture. So this is the full buyer journey from first touch to renewal mapped and managed, right? Lead to revenue architecture. That is, again, from that GTM moment to the moment to the best case scenario where this person is upselling and evangelizing our product and they are a power user, right? Change management, we've already touched on. Another concept you'll see in RevOps is operational debt. So operational debt is accumulated inefficiencies from ad hoc workflows, dirty data, or overlapping tools, right? We've got 30 spreadsheets over here that do this. We've got this CRM that does that. We're using MailChimp for this thing over here, right? Everything is distracted and pulled apart and disassembled and cluttered, right? So operational debt is all of the time debt that you owe to cleaning up and normalizing all the systems and data that you have so that it's actually usable, right? If you want to perform a certain function or have a certain insight based on the data in your company, how quickly can you do it? Is it instant? To the degree that the way you want to use your data and systems is not instant, is operational debt. And you want to reduce that operational debt as much as possible. That is a core RevOps function, reducing operational debt. Another term is revenue intelligence. Revenue intelligence is actionable insights pulled from clean, connected data systems, okay, used for decisions, not for vanity. We're not trying to say, yo, we tripled our our close rate this year. This is absolutely awesome, right? It's not about that. It's about having normalized data that's measured so we can gain insight into when things are failing, right? And within revenue intelligence, we have two kinds of indicators. We've got leading indicators and lagging indicators. Leading indicators help us to perform a core RevOps function called forecasting. Forecasting is a term that means the ability to predict revenue outcomes using historical conversion data, pipeline health, team behavior, things like that, right? That's the kind of those are the kind of leading indicators that we want. Lagging indicators are telling us how we did, right? So leading indicators tell us how we might do. They're a form of revenue. Leading indicators are a form of revenue intelligence that tell us how we might do, how we might be doing, how we might do next month, next week. And lagging indicators are a form of revenue intelligence that tell us how we've been doing last month, last week. Okay, so I just wanted to go through all these terms again. System design, alignment, process governance, source of truth, lead to revenue architecture, change management, operational debt, revenue intelligence, forecasting, leading indicators, lagging indicators, right? There you have just some core definitions. And now I want to talk about some artifacts, some RevOps artifacts, okay? Every RevOps system should produce and maintain a core set of artifacts, right? These are your strategic assets, right? And the first one we've already touched on, this is your CRM, right? The operational core must be a single source of truth, enforced by governance and automation, right? You don't want, you want as little manual work as possible, which is why you make the design, you make your RevOps design, your system design, your revenue system design as much beforehand as possible, and you make the implementation of that design as automated as possible, because that leaves room for as little error as possible, and that makes things as visible as possible, as reportable as possible, and therefore improvable as possible, right? The next artifact we produce, I've already touched on, called process diagrams, okay? These are visual maps of lead flow, deal stages, lifecycle transitions, escalation paths for tickets, right, for customer service team. Every single process your marketing, sales, or customer service team is going to potentially rely on, it is necessary that those processes are not just living in their heads. They have to live in a single source of truth somewhere. And sometimes that source of truth is the diagram, right? People like to write things out in text. Oh, let's write a big text document to explain our process. Sometimes that's not the most efficient way to transfer knowledge visually. Sometimes, ergonomically, in your mind, the easiest way to understand what's happening is to draw it out visually in a normalized way, again, using a notation system like BPMN or something like that. The next artifact is the revenue database schema. This is a well-documented model of objects, relationships between those objects, custom fields that need to exist, the internal names of those custom fields in the system if they need to be accessed via API, and integrations, right? And this is usually put in the form of an entity relationship diagram, or an ERD, using crow's foot notation. You can look that up. And so in the same way that process diagrams are usually done with some kind of pseudocode or BPMN type notation, revenue database schemas are usually represented as ERDs, okay? The next artifact that we produce with RevOps is dashboards, right? These are bar charts, line graphs, scatter plots, pie charts, just pure numerical data, pivot tables, right? And whatever the best way is of representing, and there are lots of, there's entire fields of study in data engineering and data science devoted to answering the question, what visualization type is most appropriate to answering which question and which set of data, which RevOps definitely leans on. But the point is that you have these dashboards which are meant to give you a control panel that displays in real time whether you're winning or losing, right? You should, as a RevOps person, you should always be able to answer the question with certainty. Are we winning or losing, right? Are we hitting our goals or not? How certain are we, based on our forecasting data, which we have set up in a very intentional way, that we are going to hit our goals or not in the time frame that we designated, right? Dashboards are meant to tell you that, and they're meant to hold you accountable, and they're meant to make you make it as easy as possible for you to answer for what you're doing with your time and your efforts and your money and your budget. Okay. The next artifact that we create in RevOps is SLAs and playbooks. So SLAs are service level agreements. These are written rules for handoffs, response times, right? We have an SLA that all our tickets are going to have a minimum response time a maximum response time of 24 hours, right? All of our tickets will be responded to within 24 hours, right? That's an SLA. And a playbook is a written rule for that handoff, where you it's basically a form that you fill out within your CRM. A playbook is a common feature of CRMs, but the function of it is within, you're looking at a contact record or a deal record or a ticket record, and you have a playbook that you can enter key information that's saved to that object, to that record, to the properties on that object that then trigger some kind of automation or give the next team what they need. Playbooks are most useful for, remember when I talked about those inter-team handoffs, right? From product to marketing, marketing to sales, sales to customer service, or customer success, and customer success to finance, right? Those playbooks are most useful and most critical during those handoff periods, but they can be used for other things as well. And then finally, we've got change logs and rollout docs. So change logs and rollout docs, these basically document every change to the system, including who owns it and how it was implemented, okay? And then finally, I want to note something that I have not heard many RevOps teams talk about, but this is a team charter, okay? And as your team charter, you should have, as a RevOps team, a charter which designates exactly what your responsibilities are, what your methods ought to be, and who you're accountable to, and exactly what your performance metrics are. So how do we know if we're winning or losing as a team? This should be set directly by the C-suite, because you are performing the most important function as far as they are concerned, and that you are handing them the baton that they're going to have to hand to their investors, right? That they're going to have to deal with, right? So that ultimately the C-suite is held responsible for the financial performance of the company, but beneath them, it is the RevOps team that is delegated that responsibility. And so having a charter which explicitly delineates exactly how and what that means and how that's meant to be carried out according to the C-suite is very important. A RevOps team without a team charter is going to be misguided and misaligned, and the team will not be able to have distributed authority, right? It will not be able to have decentralized command because people won't understand the fundamental philosophy or values behind the decisions that you're making on a design level or an orchestration level. So that's what RevOps is. RevOps is the design and orchestration of business systems that generate revenue. And all of what I just explained to you now are kind of what it is, why it exists historically, where it's going, and a couple key terms and artifacts that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as RevOps teams. And I hope this was beneficial to you. And, never hurts to repeat this stuff. Happy to explain it again, but I really created this as a reference point so I can send to people when they ask. So hope it was beneficial. Oh, and check us out, RevOpsHQ.com. We'd love to have you.